Get away lawyers, get away economists. Just get common people with common sense like Manyora. Give them a pen. If you create highways and the people die because you have not spent on health, who will use those highways? If you create airports and everything, and the people are so poor to use those airports and those roads, for who are you creating it? Do you need to be an economist to tell me the minimum you need to live as a human being?
No, not really.
Correct.
And glad that you have joined us on yet another edition of Business Glide here on Herman Manyora's channel. My name is Richard Mwenja. Now back here in Kenya, do we have social welfare policies? Nonetheless, all those that have existed before, have they catered for the needs and towards addressing the dire people living in utmost poverty? But before we get to that, allow me welcome our renowned public scholar, Herman Manyora. Professor, welcome on set.
Thank you, Richard.
All right. In a couple of months right now, we have seen a number of economic models being peddled around and frameworks that will see uplifting of welfare state of our citizens. Now, do you feel that these are choreographed models that are coming on board just because we have looming general elections next year that won't really materialize once the next government comes on board?
What we have is just noise, political noise.
Okay.
This being the season of madness. At best, it is sloganeering. All of it aimed at hoodwinking us into voting for them. But there's really nothing policy, well thought out policy.
Cash transfer issue, the bottom up.
You know, I would support the cash transfer. It's a little grounded in policy and practice because you can trace it in other countries, most notably Japan and Brazil from 2003. Very successful.
True.
Here we have also had cash transfer for the elderly and other vulnerables.
All right.
With varying degrees of success.
Absolutely.
So it is there, but I would have wanted it to be anchored in a much more comprehensive policy framework.
All right. Now that we are still under the theme of Mashujaa Day, I personally take concern with how we've safeguarded the interest of our senior citizens. We saw one of the heroes, post-independence heroes, Mzee Njege, coming on board, exposing himself to the media and saying that he wasn't sure if he'll get even bus fare to get to Anguru Stadium to celebrate the celebrations, though he was one of the invited heroes. Now, what happened to the cash transfer program for elderly? Because what we are getting on board, we as economists, is that very few people have access to those funds, the elderly. Where did we go wrong with regard to disbursement of the cash transfer program for the elderly?
I think Pesa kwa wazee, cash transfers for the elderly senior citizens,
All right.
was like a pilot.
All right.
Trying to size it up as can it work?
All right.
So basically, only a few were to be beneficiaries.
Okay.
The government has data that runs in about 3 million. I can't quite remember offhand.
All right.
But they were only initially able to capture a handful, stepping it up to a few 100,000.
Absolutely.
And they hadn't quite gotten to a place where it's all of them. So we are yet to know once they capture. You see, once it is selective, in other words, once like pilot, you are doing a few, it's open to abuse. How do you choose the few? And that's why the Raila one of 6,000 for every household. Initially, every unemployed, including the young, and later revised. That's why I'm saying it's not anchored in a very serious policy.
All right.
Because he shifted the moment people said it will be too expensive. He would have stuck there because there's enough money. So this one is slightly better than one of Raila because it targets everybody in a certain category. That's easier to implement. But when you are a pilot harvesting, when you are selecting who to give from a category,
All right.
it's prone to abuse.
All right, sir.
Yeah.
If we are looking at the welfare of our business people here in Kenya, the World Bank recently released a report and Kenya was ranked number 56 out of 190 economies with regards to the ease of doing business. Now, if you go to Rwanda, I was there the other day and let me tell you, it can take you as little as 6 hours to open up your enterprises fully registered digital-wise and probably break ground in a week or two. Back here in Kenya, we have seen a number of SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, and also large-scale entrepreneurs facing issues with regards to just getting the licensing and also the go-ahead to break ground. How can we forge ahead with regards to making this really an easy platform for many entrepreneurs to have a swift way through trading?
It's always good to give credit first where it is due.
All right?
The ecology of doing business in this country has changed tremendously.
Absolutely.
Government has really improved. And like you talk about Rwanda, today you can register a company in Kenya in a matter of hours. It was never so. You can do it alone. You can be the only director. It used to be not possible.
What of the other licensing?
So I'm beginning there and saying,
All right.
give credit where it is due.
Absolutely.
Through the Huduma Center initiative, the e-citizen platform.
Absolutely.
It's much easier to register a company. However, it is still very difficult to do business in Kenya because of the many, many licenses. In fact, sometimes we need to give credit to Musalia Mudavadi. He, as minister, I think, in charge of local government or something like that, or treasury, I can't quite remember. He's the one who came up with a single business permit. Before that, it was a nightmare. The number of permits and licenses you needed to operate, especially in Nairobi. Even today, it is still difficult.
Yeah, true.
And you can imagine how much more difficult it is for foreigners, including work permit, for specialized staff, and so on and so forth. So yes, I agree with you. We need to improve and make Kenya an investment destination. Only then can we give the young men jobs. Because if you don't attract investment, if it's difficult doing business, how will you employ these young men and women?
All right, sir. We have recently, and we still are under that cloud of that cloud that is the drought issue. Now, this has become a perennial menace to us as Kenyans, and we have seen the government coming forward and handing out handouts, food reliefs to those people who are under severe poverty due to drought and other issues. Going ahead, many have come forward and said they want dignity in labor. Don't you see we need to change tact with regards on our welfare schemes instead of handouts, now going big to making these people empowered with regards to producing rather than not just receiving handouts?
Nobody is happy to be given.
All right.
By nature, no human being is happy to be given. That's granted.
But why will our political class make it look like that's the way to go?
You see, possible they pursue wrong policies, or there are no policies,
All right.
which then turn Kenyans into destitutes. And then they normalize handouts. We have made handouts look very normal. Things that can make somebody die with shame in other places. You get it?
Absolutely.
Today we have children of billionaires in this country, even queuing for things like help. Loan meant to help poor children get university education.
All right.
Because we have no shame in handouts. And our politicians are majorly to respond for that. So we need to have policies that will return dignity to Kenyans, make them work hard, make farmers earn from their farming. And government interventions are always necessary everywhere in the world, including strong economies like America. There are subsidies, for example. Big countries, Russia, they have subsidies for farmers. So instead of waiting to give people handout, why can't you give them the sufficient subsidies? Engage them in terms of modern methods of farming. Help them with marketing of their produce. If government were to do this, farmers would not want handouts.
True.
Yeah, nobody wants handouts.
All right, sir. Majority in our Kenyan labor force are physically fatigued, yes, and of course also mentally exhausted. And they are coming forward and say that it's high time as an economy we match our wage, or rather our salary rates, to the inflation. So we match our wages to the inflation index. However, we haven't seen really a change in terms of minimum wage here in Kenya. Now, taking the context of USA, we saw it revitalizing its minimum wage to its labor force. Don't you see it's high time the exchequer and the taxman at large comes forward with avenues to create enough surplus so that we can at least adjust the minimum wages here in Kenya?
You see, it's not a question of the exchequer. It's not even a question of government.
All right.
The wage scenario in this country is lousy.
All right.
It goes back to the colonial days. When the African was not paid a salary, they were slaves.
All right.
The white man came for free labor. But because of international spotlights and the modern monitoring systems and the realities, it became necessary that they give them tokens. So they were not really salaries. The African worker, the servant of Bwana, the settler, even if you look at these colonial houses, look at the window in the servant quarter. It is up there. You can't even see Bwana coming in the homestead. In other words, the African was not a human being.
All right.
You get it? So the salaries must be viewed in that context, the wages. We don't have living wages in this country.
All right.
So we have to start somewhere. Create a base wage. You get it?
All right.
Let not SRC cannot do it.
All right.
Let us have a national conversation of how to create the minimum wage. And I've always argued it's a very simple way.
How do you go about
Get away lawyers, get away economists. Just get common people with common sense like Manyora. Give them a pen. You take a pen, Bilal, you take one, I take one. We tell Bilal, note down how many packets of unga a family of a man and his wife and 2 children can eat. Let's calculate. If they take 1 packet of maize flour in 3 days, in 2 days, we write there 15 for the month. Times 120, we put there. They do skuma wiki of 10 shillings every day. Write it down for 30 days. Let's go on. Let's say they live in the worst place.
All right.
Before we demolish these slums, we say rent 3,000. We write it there. You know, we'll get the minimum. And even before we do that, I can tell you on top of my head, if you pay anybody in this country below 40,000 shillings, you are wasting your time.
Aren't you disgracing the role of welfare economist here in Kenya?
No, the economists are people who just want to mess us for nothing. This is a simple... Do you need to be an economist to tell me the minimum you need to live as a human being?
No, not really.
Correct.
All right, sir.
Once we start there, the rest will be easy to pick up. We shall now begin to look at other indexes you use.
All right.
Levels of training, how many years in school. Therefore, for this job, you give this. For this one, you give this.
All right, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Now, a job and a good one at it is the linchpin towards eradicating dire poverty in Kenya. Yes. We saw the sitting administration, that's the Jubilee government, come on board and say in its second term of re-election, which is now about to exit or rather come to an end, a promise of 1.3 million jobs annually for the Kenyan youth. However, 3 years later, do we still this as a feasible policy that come before the end of 2022?
Those are the same economists I'm telling you. We just talk.
All right.
You say there are 1 million jobs, but I'm not seeing the jobs. People are still working here. You say growth rate of 6%. What is the growth rate? It must be felt in the pocket with a shilling. That's what I'm telling these called economists. They're just jokers.
But there are the proposals that have been made by the president, even on Mashujaa Day, towards
I am saying they are listening to people who are good at looking at textbooks.
All right.
You cannot run a country through a textbook. You cannot run an economy through a textbook. You get it? Great economists did not ask economists to sit down. Economists are recording what the great people did. You get it?
All right.
Even Adam Smith, the great economist, he was not the one who created the economics.
Okay.
He was talking about the wealth of nation.
Okay.
How do nations create wealth? What are the processes? They didn't rely on an economist.
All right. Coming to almost the tail of our first edition, or rather of our first part on this edition on welfare state. Going ahead, majority have proposed that we go slow on infrastructural development and really direct those funds towards at least meeting the basic welfare initiatives such as food security and other initiatives. Do you propose the same? So instead of going big on road infrastructure, we channel that towards access to medical?
There's only one word: balance. You must strike a balance.
All right.
That if you create highways,
all right,
and the people die because you have not spent on health, who will use those highways?
All right.
If you create airports and everything, and the people are so poor to use those airports and those roads, for who are you creating it? If you create all these big, wonderful infrastructure projects, and the people are hungry, and they are dying of hunger, so this is balance.
All right.
You balance between the project development and the social aspect. How much do you spend on education? Because even if you do all this wonderful thing, and the country doesn't have educated manpower, you are wasting your time. So you need to balance.
All right. Well, thank you, Professor. And that point by Professor Herman Manyora brings us to the wrap of our first part conversation on matters Kenyan welfare state. Remember, this conversation goes on our subsequent edition, whereby we'll now look largely at the policies that have been brought forth by President Uhuru Kenyatta during the Mashujaa speech, amongst an array of others. And will they work? We wait to see. But before we leave, as is our norm here on Business Glide, we give shout out, or rather credits, to our fan of the week. And today is a man called Gatquoth Jal from South Sudan.
Gatquoth Jal.
Yeah.
From South Sudan.
Juba.
All
right.
Asante sana. Sana. Tell people in Juba to subscribe and we have a conversation.
All right.
South Sudan and Kenya, brothers and sisters.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, viewers, until next time on Business Glide, see you then. My name is Richard Mwenja. God bless you.